Well, hello everybody and welcome to the Broadly Speaking series at the Wheeler Centre. I'm Angela Pippos, I am your host tonight, and our excellent topic is Ahead of the Game, Sport, Storytelling and Symbolism. Before I introduce our fabulous panel, I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting today on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and to any First Nations people who are with us tonight. This event is presented in partnership by the Wheeler Centre and the Women in Sports Media Forum, with support from the Our Watch National Media Engagement Program and Emma Race. The Broadly Speaking series is proudly supported by Christina Campbell Pretty AM and Family and the copyright agency Cultural Fund. We have one COVID-safe announcement, and you all know what it is. You're required to wear a mask inside, and you've all got them on, which is great. We'll have a Q&A at the end of the event. When you're asking your questions, please keep your mask on. If it's muffled, don't worry, I will repeat the question. Okay, now to our panel. Rana Hussain, down the end, is a diversity and inclusion leader and one of a handful of women of colour working in sports admin. Rana is a pioneer and a passionate advocate for social inclusion and reducing discrimination through the vehicle of sport and media. She was recently appointed Diversity and Inclusion Manager at Cricket Australia, and she's part of the Outer Sanctum podcast. Courtney Hagen is a proud Butchulla and Gubbi Gubbi woman from the southern Sunshine Coast region in Queensland. Courtney is currently an Indigenous engagement specialist at Cricket Australia. Her work and advocacy for marginalised groups in community sport earned her a nomination as Out Role Model of the Year at the 2021 Australian Pride in Sport Awards. Courtney was the inaugural participant in Siren Sport's Emerging Sports Writer program and has produced an extensive, high-level body of work covering diverse sports and voices for publication on Siren. And Joanna Lester is joining us via link very shortly. So let's all just send a quick prayer to the gods and goddesses of technology. I'm sure we will be fine. Joanna is a journalist, filmmaker and communications specialist who focuses on sport and its social impact. There she is. She has lived in Australia, Papua New Guinea and the UK and works across the Pacific. In 2020, Joanna won the Walkley Foundation June Andrews Women's Leadership in Media Award for her doco Power Mary, Powerful Women. Told through the voices of PNG's pioneering female rugby league players, it follows the journey of PNG's first national women's rugby league team to the World Cup and explores how women playing the country's male-dominated national sport is changing lives and attitudes. And for those who don't know me, I'm a journalist, presenter, documentary maker, author and campaigner for gender equality in sport and society, and a proud ambassador of the Adelaide Crows. Thank you for not booing. And we also have academic, journalist and broadcaster Kate O'Halloran in seat 1A down the front. As part of our team tonight, Kate will be our active listener from the sidelines and will be providing a match report on tonight's discussion. Kate will highlight the key ideas and provide her reflections in a piece that will be published on the Wheeler Centre website for you to read after tonight's event. So, welcome to all of you. And let's get into it. And there's really only one way to get into this event tonight. This way. A big, wild round of applause for Ash Barty. Woo! Wimbledon champion 50 years after Yvonne Goolagong-Cawley won her first Wimbledon title. What a moment in history, not just sport, but our nation's history. It was fantastic. So, Courtney, I'm going to throw to you first. What did Ash Barty's win mean for you personally, but also for Australia?
I mean, it's one for the romantics, isn't it? I think you can't picture it better. It was like a movie. The 50th anniversary of Yvonne Goolagong, like winning, her wearing the tribute dress, and then her winning, like it just, I can't believe it actually happened. And I think I was watching an interview recently with Yvonne, and she said the last text that she sent Ash was "dreams do come true," and like it's beautiful. But seeing the way that this has been happening across media for a long time, Ash's heritage has been sort of hidden, or people are shying away from shouting to the rooftops that she's a Narrabri woman. And seeing how much that's been celebrated now after that Wimbledon, we've come a really long way. So seeing that black excellence and that black joy, means a whole lot. And I think Australia's really getting around that, which is really exciting.
And Rana, it felt like, wow, we needed a heroine, didn't we? We needed someone at this juncture in our history. It felt very powerful. It was emotional. Tell me how you felt about it when she held her hands up.
I was so happy, but I have to say, and I've been seeing it all over Twitter, like which Australian brings people together like Ash Barty did that night. And literally the Outer Sanctum crew and I were on the phone texting each other throughout the whole night, and I just had this moment of like, she really is. We are all texting each other, talking about this. We're all picking out Mel Jones in the crowd and feeling like, there was one of us there for us. There was something about that event, but more broadly that, we talk about sport being the national language, and, what is our language saying when it's an Aboriginal woman and Dylan Alcott, an all-abilities tennis player who are our heroes at the moment, Yeah. I can't help but feel like that's progress, and I know there's more nuance than that, and we're going to get into it, but God, when it comes to symbols, what could you want?
I know. I texted Mel Jones. I'm insanely jealous. And she was singled out, but it did feel like she was representing us, and wow, what a special moment for Mel to be there. Let's get into it. I'm going to start with 3 words that have been thrown at me throughout my whole career, and that is stick to sport. And just stick to sport. It's like sport is this thing that exists all by itself away from the rest of society. So people who believe that sport is just sport think it's a competition. There's a winner, there's a loser, there's a post-match interview, and that's it. And it's infuriating because it hasn't really left that stick to sport thing. So to each of you, and I'll start with you, Joanna, how do you like your sport served up?
Such a great point, because I was often told the same thing. And in fact, one of the reasons I didn't always stick to sport in my career was because of that approach that you described. It was very formulaic, and for me that wasn't meaningful enough. It was an opportunity to tell stories within that formula, and it's only really in the past few years being able to sort of break out of that formula and tell sport stories differently that I've embraced it even more. So I guess I like it served up with a big dose of the bigger picture.
Courtney?
I'd say it's passion. I'd say it's storytelling of people. You don't remember how many points got scored. You remember the cheers in the locker room after the game. You remember the pre-match amp up by the coach. And I think that's the most important part of sport for me.
It's about telling a truth, isn't it, Rana?
Yeah, I think, going back to Mel, like part of what sport is the people who consume it too, and who get to watch it and dream about it and wish that they were there. So when sport acknowledges the different identities and the people that do love sport, it feels really real to me. But I will say my caveat is that for me, siren to siren, or day 1 to 5, that's sacred to me, because sometimes sport is that place where I can switch off the rest of it. And that's why so many of us flock to sport. And I think that's sometimes what's missed in these conversations, that we need to honour the fact that we love sport for what it is, which is the spectacle where we do get to put our baggage aside sometimes and just enjoy the game.
Yes, there is absolutely a role for the match report. And when I was at the ABC, I spent many a weekend doing just that, a match report. But there's also a place for that deeper analysis and to join a few dots, and that it is more than that. But I do take your point. For me, I've used sport to talk about gender equality more broadly. And for me, I can't really have a conversation about women's sport without talking about that pursuit of equality, because the two are impossible to disentangle, and that's because the sporting landscape is not even yet. It's improving, but it still is uneven. Back when I started as a journalist many years ago, it was really hard to bring equality into the conversation. Now, thankfully, that has changed. 5 or so years ago, it worked its way into the public consciousness, and now equality is a buzzword, right? Everyone's talking about it. It's very zeitgeisty. Do any of you have trouble bringing equality into the conversation when you're pitching ideas, or when you've got, things that you want to write about? Do you have to slip it in surreptitiously, the way that I put vegetables in the sauce with my son? Or can you say it? Can you say, let's fix this clearly unequal situation?
Do you want me to go? Are our buses in the room?
Let it rip.
All right, I'll jump in. Look, yes, it's a bit of both, really. I find now more than ever, which is where I get the hope from, is that people are more open and have an appetite for just the straight up equality conversation. And that's why I'm hired in places. That's why I have a job, because people have acknowledged, no, this is something that we do need to work on. So that's something. But I do find that when I bring it, if I really kind of launch into it, it's often met with silence, which is so awkward, especially in a Zoom meeting, when you've said the thing and then you just have to sit there and wait for people to kind of go, oh, okay, and I'm a little bit uncomfortable now. So it's still a very, very hard conversation to have. And so often Courtney and I are talking about, how do we make this palatable? How do we make sure this isn't as threatening? How can we position this so it gets more buy-in? When you just want to say,
it's the right thing to do.
It's the right thing to do, and I'm a human too, and I love sport, so why is taking a knee such a big deal, and why do we have to stay cold and manage that conversation?
Joanna, when you were pitching your documentary idea, was there any resistance along the way, or did you find that it was something that people wanted to be involved with?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I wouldn't use the word resistance. I would say more bemusement and not really getting the point of it at the time. And for me, this journey started at the beginning of 2016, and sort of pitching the concept throughout that year and making pitch trailers. It wasn't getting that much traction. And then a couple of things happened towards the end of that year, the early next year. One was that Papua New Guinea hosted the FIFA Under-20 Women's World Cup, which is quite unexpected because football is not a huge sport in Papua New Guinea, but it really changed the way that people thought about elite women's sport there. And the second thing that happened here in Australia was the AFLW started. And for some of the people I was pitching to here, suddenly women's sport was squarely on the radar, and that really, after a year of trying to persuade people of the concept of making a documentary about a women's sporting team, got things moving.
So the sort of storylines that I pursue are to do with levelling the landscape. So I often write about, casual sexism and conscious, unconscious bias, the disparity in pay, all of that, statues. I want to know from you, perhaps, Rana, to begin with, what symbolic storylines do you want to see more of in sports writing?
I think this is the question I skipped and thought I'd get back to when I was thinking about it.
Sorry.
No. To be honest, when I first thought about that question, was the story I really want to hear is CEO, woman CEO. I don't even want to hear the word woman CEO, but, the story about the female CEO who gets the job, who isn't, bullied or harassed, who succeeds and is supported. That's the story I want to read about and see play out, not just once, but over, the entire ecosystem and over again. That's kind of what I feel like is the next frontier for us.
Courtney?
I want to see stories about, Deborah in rural New South Wales, who has been at this softball club for 50 years, has adopted kids that have come through and need a place to stay. I want to read stories about community sport that, it's great to hear about our elite athletes, don't get me wrong, particularly the women's space is really hard to get into, but I think sometimes we really miss that incredible narrative of community sport on the ground, and some of those stories I think are more relatable for people because that could be them, and I think also shine the light on how important figures are in community can be more than our highest achieving athletes.
When we were talking about this yesterday in preparation, you were saying, Rana, that you wanted more than just the symbolism. You wanted the real story.
Yeah, I think that's right. You've reminded me. It's been one of those days. This is women in sport. I think, and this came up for me when we first workshopped this topic as well, around symbolism and how important it is. But I do think that, and when we talk about inclusion, that you need kind of both pillars, that we often talk about authentic work and it not being token, and that is so important and crucial even. But if people don't know that that's happening, if you don't have those highlight moments, if you don't have that symbolic conversation and storytelling going on throughout sport, people think that it's not happening, and if it's not visible, it's not happening at the end of the day. But if you only do the symbol, then we all know that story.
Yep. When we were putting together the record, the two-part series about the Women's T20 World Cup, Nicole mentioned, my co-producer, and I wanted to sort of plonk in some symbols because it was a creative, fun thing to do. So what we did, and it's not that everything I talk about gets back to statues, but I'm a bit obsessed with statues, I've got to say. What we did was we had all these male statues from other grounds around the country, and when we get to the crescendo, the MCG on March the 8th last year, we have a statue of Betty Cuthbert. And I said, I think we need to add something to it to really sort of hammer home the point that women have made it to this ground. So my idea, which I still laugh about now, was to have a little uplifting musical sting as we have the statue. And nobody has picked up on the uplifting musical sting. It was way too subtle and symbolic.
Is it there?
It is there.
Okay.
You can just hear it, but it's kind of funny. It made me laugh when we were talking about symbolism yesterday. So there's no point in doing it if only two producers can actually hear it and get the hang of it. But it was funny. Joanna, let's talk more about the value of sport in telling these kinds of stories. What is it about sport that makes it such a powerful vehicle for telling stories about equality?
I think firstly, it's a way to bring people into the conversation who wouldn't otherwise think they'd be interested in any way in that conversation. I mean, to use the example of the documentary that I made, it is used as a conversation starter about the role of women in Papua New Guinean society and the opportunities that are or aren't available, and shown often in, for example, in mine sites, to groups of predominantly male staff who wouldn't normally ever have that conversation, or even just in a village or something. And so if you just sort of got everyone around and started to try and have that discussion, it's not going to happen. But if you can do it through sport, if people spend just over an hour watching what they might have gone into it thinking is a sports documentary, but what I've always said is not just about sport, it's also about women. It's a conversation starter for many issues, in this case gender equality, but in some of the other examples we've talked about other sort of diversity and inclusion and equality issues. So it just really is a sort of a common language and a convening space, isn't it?
Yeah. Courtney, do you have any sort of favourite women or non-binary writers who are pursuing these themes in their sports writing? People who you look up to and who influence you in some way?
Well, I mean, Casey down the front here is definitely up top, and obviously I've got Rana right beside me as well, who I can't not say, but obviously these two are huge in this area. I also think about just women in my life, and historically my ancestors as well. They're not writing things down; they're telling stories through generations and generations, and that all influences the way that I can tell stories. So yeah, they're my inspirations.
Of course, the other part of all this is women athletes being willing to tell the story the way it is. And I found one of the challenges has been the reluctance of women athletes over the years, not as much now, but just afraid to tell it how it is for fear of there being a backlash. And so they've relied on the mantra of, I'm just grateful to have been given the opportunity to play the sport I love. And, thankfully this is changing, and that is important. Towards the end of our doco, Beth Mooney says, when she's talking about March the 8th last year, she says, there are a lot of things people are going to remember that day. There are a lot of things people are going to remember that day for, and none of it is going to be about the game. And it was just great, that turning point that, the athletes are now comfortable enough to talk about the bigger picture, because that has been quite difficult in the past. Have you got some examples, Rana, of sports or sports women who are doing this really well? I mean, netball calling out sexism the other week was good, but, and how are they helping you with your storytelling?
This is a really random one. Like, the reason is random, but I'm going to go with it anyway. Darcy Vesio is so funny and different, and has carved out her own space in media in a really different way. Yeah. She hasn't gone down I'm going to boundary write and I'm going to, be the voice behind the play. She's lent into her strengths, her personality, her humour, and it's in such a female way, and I really love that. And I love that she's not afraid to do that, and she doesn't feel like she has to fit a particular mould of even the women's footy player. And I love it when I see people kind of bring their authentic self to the fore. Absolutely.
Joanna, when you were interviewing the players for your documentary, were they comfortable about speaking about the role that they were playing in busting stereotypes and owning that space where they belong?
Really good question. And this is something I often tell people who are preparing or have already started making a documentary about a team or about athletes, and one like this that sort of has a social impact goal. It's a partnership, and not every athlete is going to feel comfortable with that. There were a few players who I knew personally, they'd known me for a long time and we trusted each other, who ended up being the main characters, some of the more prominent spokespeople in the documentary. And at the beginning, a lot of the other players were not really on board with this idea of the PNG National Women's Rugby League team was also doing something bigger in society. They understandably just wanted to prepare for their first World Cup, and they actually used to make fun of the players when we were interviewing them and tell them they were wasting their time. And the following year, when those players were travelling to other countries to promote the doco, they did not think they wasted their time anymore. But it was, this was like I sort of said about trying to pitch the concept in the first place. This was relatively early. This is 2017. The journey that the filming began in 2017, whereas now there's been so many more examples of similar kinds of work, and I think a lot of athletes will be familiar with them and familiar with the large number of sports people who have used social media to really almost, as Rana said, kind of create a bit of a personality for themselves and sort of genuinely set their stake out. But it's really got to be, it has got to be genuine, and it's not for everyone. And all teams kind of have that balance, I think.
Your job is to make cricket less pale, male and stale. And that, changing that culture will make it easier for women cricketers to speak out. I know you're fairly new in the role, but what's the plan? How do you change the culture of a big, heavily masculine organisation like Cricket Australia?
Ultimately, it's not what I do. At the end of the day, it's what the organisation does. And so, my remit and my predecessor, Adam Cassidy, and this woman, amazing woman sitting next to me, did a power of work to bring this conversation to the table. And so now what I'm doing and taking that baton to the next leg is to kind of make it business as usual and part of the everyday of what we do in cricket and within the organisation. And I think there's an appetite for that now. It's kind of incredible. I think coming from football, there is that view that cricket is so behind. And football is really good at telling the story. And what I've discovered is that cricket is doing a lot of the work, but maybe not telling the story. And so, to my point before, we kind of need to do both.
It's very competitive like that, working with different sports. They all claim to be number one in the quality stakes.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, that's good because it forces them all to fix up their own backyard. You touched on football. AFL, one thing it's not doing well is developing women coaches. And we saw recently Peter Searle quit St Kilda. And Caroline Wilson wrote at the time that clubs are still culturally wedded to 150 years of the men's game, and until that thinking shifts, AFLW will continue to be a competition run by men. We could be going into season 6 with 14 clubs, all with a male coach. Courtney, how do we fix that? I mean, the AFL talks a very strong game about developing women coaches, but they're not doing it clearly fast enough. You've worked in community sport. Is that where it starts for women who want to carve out a career as a coach?
I think so. I think not even just the community, I think it's changing the whole mindset of sport in general, that firstly, that women's sport isn't a stepping stone to working in male sport, firstly, in any facet of professional sport, but also changing that mindset of we have the best coach is a male coach. And that is something that I think players also need to start adjusting to as well. But I think we need the support of male advocates and people already in our systems to create space for women to have these experiences. So then they do have that opportunity to even get in the door, because right now all the doors are closed. So just open the door, please.
Rana, your observations, because that's a world that you're very familiar with, AFL, AFLW.
Yeah.
What's blocking women?
I mean, it's a system that was built specifically to exclude women. So, what do you do with that? I think all across the industry, in all other industries as well, when you want to make something happen, you put a strategy in place, you plan around it, and you set yourself targets, and you hire people to make sure that happens. And I guess that's my question is, if that's what we want to do, then where's the plan? Let's plan around it and make it happen. It's not going to happen overnight. So what are we actually going to do about it?
We might get back to AFLW a bit later, but I want to talk about social media and the internet, because the way we tell these stories is changing. And you mentioned Open the Door. This has allowed a lot of women writers in, and that is a good thing. Courtney, what role is the internet and social media in particular playing in telling sport differently?
It's massive. I think it's a great insight to telling those stories that only take 7 seconds, like a video, or bringing insight into people's personalities. It's being able to showcase something really quickly while someone's just scrolling through, even like match scores. You just scroll past and you already know it. You don't read the whole match report anymore. The structure is so different, but it's really exciting because it's just bringing it to a whole new audience as well.
For you, Rana, you're a hit on Twitter.
Why don't I have more
One of our
followers
favourites.
Follow me, everybody.
If you're not following Rana, you really should be.
It's at Rana Hussain 7.
Something like that, yeah. You'll find me.
And you tweeted something a week or so ago, and it had me in stitches, because you said that you get asked, how do you do inclusion? It just, I know it's not supposed to be funny.
Oh, well, yeah.
But is this the level of sort of conversation that you have with people, that how do you do it? Like,
yeah.
And how do you respond to that?
I say, well, what is it that you want to do, first of all? Like, what are you talking about? But actually, who are you talking about? Who's in your four walls? What is it that you actually want to achieve here? I mean, it's so sprawling and the sky's the limit when it comes to inclusion, and people seem to think, you jump in here, Courtney, but people seem to think there's some kind of magic bullet that you can, and like I own a button that I press and then suddenly the organisation's inclusive. It's just...
But don't you?
Oh God, let's work on that.
Yeah. Help. No, but thanks for laughing. No, but like it's exactly that. Like I think it's why. Like what purpose does it bring? Is it just for funding? If it's for anything other than the fact that you want to be better and have more people involved and that they're safe. Otherwise, yeah, what are you doing here?
Yep.
Yeah.
Women in sport is currently a catch-all, but you can't deny that some women are more privileged than others. Rana, how can the women in sport movement, from a women in sport media perspective, be more inclusive to ensure that women in sport is not just white, cisgender, heterosexual, able-bodied women?
In 2017, I rocked up to a Women in Media panel about the beginning of the AFLW, and you were sitting on that panel.
Right. And
I remember thinking, how do I get up there and ask that very question? And I think, look at myself now, and we're doing that. We're talking about this. So how do you do that? I think it's, you just open the door, you invite people in. You know, Emma Race invited me into the Outer Sanctum because she heard about me and said, why don't you come on the show? And then we hit it off. And, you know, I'm part of the squad. Siren do the same thing. They ask people to write. So you just literally are bringing people in, to quote Emma Race, throw the ladder down, and you ask people to be part of it, and you effectively look around and say, who's missing here? And it's not always possible, but at the very least, you've got to ask yourself the question and say, are we really being representative? And I think you might not want to be, to the point we were making before, that when we talk about women, if we mean women, then that is all women. But if we don't mean all women, then let's be specific about who we're talking about. And if our programs and our initiatives are for white women by product and action, then are we comfortable to say that? You know?
Yeah, good. Joanna, would you like to add something to that about how do we, because this is a movement, you know, and it's it's a movement that's getting its act together only quite recently. I mean, women in sport was a very small movement 10 years ago because there weren't many of us. We had drinks on a rooftop bar once a month, and, the blokes in sports said, "Oh, you're getting together. Wait, do you talk about us?" They actually thought that we were getting together just to moan about them. And that's not that long ago. Now we have a proper movement, but I do worry about whether it reflects actual society. Joanna, have you got anything you'd like to add?
Well, I think this really links in well with one of the topics we just talked about, actually, which is the internet and social media and the growth of the media landscape. And that really is helping. Does the mainstream media coverage of sport reflect actual society? Definitely not. Not just in gender equality, but in the backgrounds of the people who, look at the demographics of a major sporting competition in this country and look at the demographics of 90% of the media people who are covering it. They are not the same. The voices of people in that sport are often not heard, or some groups of people in that sport are often not heard. And I think this, for the mainstream media, that's a huge issue. For some of the organisations that we all work for, be they websites, podcasts, and the Outer Sanctum is a great example, proactively seeking to address this. So I think the landscape is changing, but the platforms that your average Australian watches are probably not changing yet.
Courtney, as a younger sort of emerging sports writer and an Indigenous woman, do you feel represented by this women in sport movement? Do you feel
not
invited,
exactly.
embedded?
I do feel invited. I definitely will say, like, any area that I've been in, I've been welcomed with open arms, but represented, no, probably. But that's where I think I look to find someone I can relate to in that area, and there really is a very small amount of women of colour even who are part of women in sport. And I reflect on growing up, watching how exciting it was to see a female commentator or a female boundary line person, but they're always these, and to no offence, like just, white, beautiful, blonde girls that, have been in the media for a long time that have just jumped into sport or something like that. So it's something you can't really see yourself in, but what's really exciting is I feel very relaxed to just bring my whole self into women's sport areas, particularly around media. So that's reflective of the environment that the women before me have really fought for, and obviously like non-binary and trans people in the space as well. So if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be able to feel as comfortable as I do.
Some second wave feminists argue that emphasising the differences between women detracts from the common struggle. Does that argument resonate with any of you on any level? That's a no?
Not at all.
Yeah.
I think if we don't emphasise our differences in the way that we are all so uniquely amazing, I think that completely detracts from us being a whole. Sorry, I thought you were about to ask something else.
No, now I'm thinking about something else. But yes, so it is leading me to the conversation around whether it's fair for transgender women to compete against biologically female athletes. And that debate is so often characterised as sort of human rights advocates in one corner and female athletes in the other corner. I'm just wondering how we, as storytellers, can contribute to this discussion in a positive way rather than it just being so sort of aggro and, there's no nuance. Rana, what do you think?
To your point before and the question about even, is the difference creating the problem? I think as well, I've been a bit cheeky, but I think if people are getting there first, they're getting there first. But the point is, that you turn around and then say, okay, who else can I bring along? And I think that's sort of more the space that I'd like to play in. That I don't, I don't mind that there are people that are maybe making it before I do, because that is the system that we're in and that's the structure that we're all trying to dismantle. But when those people do make it, I kind of want to just see that they're also looking around.
I think even debunking your question before around one side we've got human rights activists and one side we have female athletes, and I don't even think that's fair on female athletes. I think there's a lot that do recognise themselves as human rights activists and are very pro-transgender women participating in sport, and I think we've got to play into that narrative a lot more to support the human rights of all people. But I think for me, obviously not going into the science of things, people don't wake up one day and decide they're going to be an Olympian and that they need to transition to do so. And I think even changing our wording from transitioning to affirming is still really important as well, because people find that as an enlightening experience rather than giving people ammo to tee off however they like. And it's really interesting watching people's obsession with, if someone's really good at something, we have to debunk it. We have to make sure that they're not cheating or taking drugs to perform, or they're not, why are they so much better than I am, when really they're just really talented. And if you're not, that's totally fine, but you don't have to get on the hate train. But when we're talking about someone's human rights as a trans athlete, and I'm not a person to talk to it at all, but if I'm talking as a human being about respecting other human beings, why on earth would we think that someone shouldn't be allowed to have a fundamental human right of participating in sport? It's simple.
Yeah.
It's really simple.
I want to share a story with you now, and some people in the audience may be aware of this. In his revisionist history podcast entitled The Lady Vanishes, Malcolm Gladwell tells the story of Elizabeth Thompson. Her 1874 painting, The Roll Call, is one of the most celebrated paintings of the 19th century. It hung in a coveted position in the Royal Academy of Art, and in 1879, Thompson came within 2 votes of becoming the first woman to be elected as an associate member of the Royal Academy. Her next masterpiece was hidden in the Academy's rafters, and she then disappeared from the art world stage altogether. As Gladwell says, the artist defeated. He argues that this is a case of moral licensing. Open the door, let a woman in just once, pat yourself on the back and close the door again. When I heard this podcast, it just sounded so much like sport. It sounded like a lot of my career. I was often the only one in the room, and it was seen as a great achievement to have one woman at an organisation. Moral licensing, the act of doing something morally good, gives the licence to hold opinions that are the opposite of morally good. Rana, does this happen in sport?
No, never.
Was it just me?
What are you talking about?
It's got a term. It's moral licensing.
You mentioned this yesterday when we were talking about it, and it made me so sad because you sort of said something along the lines of, you thought there would be others behind you.
Yes.
And and I've heard Callie Underwood say something really similar. People often talk about women being competitive with each other, but actually we're all just where's everyone else? I'm really lonely.
I want to have a good time. I wanted to hang with more women.
Yeah.
It's very boring just talking sport with blokes. And it never really happened until, now there's more likely to find more than one woman in the room. But it was interesting that it gave it sort of an academic context for me. And I was like, well, that's what they do. Tick. We've got our woman, and it's really hard to create significant change when you're the only woman in the room.
Sometimes because I live and breathe this, sometimes I think, oh yeah, we're doing really well, or we've made it, or you see a sellout crowd at the MCG for a women's tournament and you think, yep, progress. But if we don't stay on it, it very quickly goes away, and COVID has really shown that up.
Yes.
Women have really taken the cost of that, and I just think some days when I'm a bit like, oh, I can't be bothered, I think, no, I need to keep my foot on the pedal here.
Yep. I've just got a couple more questions, then we will open it up to the floor. I want to talk about women's sport, or should we just call it sport? Because I find this topic fascinating, because I try and work out where people stand on this issue, and I'm often wrong. So I'll see if you surprise me. Some people say that we should stop calling it women's sport because it devalues it. It makes it sound like, an inferior version of the real sport. To each of you, Joanna, I'll start with you. Are you comfortable sort of with the W in sport, or should it go?
Personally, as a person who works in communications, I'm all about clear communications, and at this point, I think in most contexts, it is clearer to differentiate. For example, Rugby Union decided to remove the word women's from their Women's Rugby Union World Cup, and I think that occasionally causes some lack of clarity in needing to read beyond headlines and that sort of thing. So it depends on the context. At this point, I think we need to differentiate, but I do see that there may be a time in future where that changes.
Any counter view?
Look, I'm from the Outer Sanctum, so I'm going to say this with so much pride, is that I like AFLM, why aren't we, if we're men's cricket, women's cricket, if we need to be clear, to Joanna's point, then let's just make it equal.
Yeah. Makes sense to me.
Changing that default from
yes,
sport it's men's sport, it's not. So I think adding that M is really important.
I got locked in a conversation with Ronda Rousey about this, and she disagreed with me, and I wasn't going to argue with her.
It's a big flex.
I think, once women are valued equally to men, that's the end goal, is to be valued and respected equally, and we're not there yet. So I say, let's shout the W. And finally, I want to just ask, what is your dream storytelling project? So I'm trying to come up with my own ideas, and I'm hoping my idea does involve the FIFA Women's World Cup in 2023, and I'm hoping it involves dinner with Megan Rapinoe. But I don't know whether that's going to happen. It's my dream project. Courtney, what's yours?
I'd really love to interview people from the WNBA and the way that they've approached the Black Lives Matter movement in the last couple of seasons, particularly players like Maya Moore, but also advocates like Sue Bird. I think that's probably my ultimate, being a super basketball nut, which I don't get to really play in too much in my life, but definitely them, 100%.
Rana?
Well, now I just want to have dinner with Megan Rapinoe.
You can come too.
Yeah, please. There's so many, but one that came to mind, I was recently on a Muslim Women in Sports global conference, and it just didn't occur to me, and it's so silly that it didn't occur to me, but just seeing all the Muslim women around the world who live and breathe sport in all the different ways, and I would just love to do a documentary and follow their stories. There was a woman in Uganda who started off doing soccer for her son on the street, and now she's the head of a sports foundation there. There's skateboarders, snowboarders wearing their hijabs, to the CEO of Turkish football, who's a Muslim woman. They ran the gamut of expertise, and those stories I would love to dive into.
Mm-hmm. Joanna?
Something that I'm really excited about at the moment is the imminent announcement of the Brisbane 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games. What an opportunity for Australia, for the region, for the Pacific, where I do a lot of work, and something that we have such a big lead time into. I'm not quite sure what the project is, but with an 11-year lead time into that Games, whether it's following the stories of young women now who will probably still be teenage girls at this point who are Olympic hopefuls, both from Australia and the Pacific, something where we all end up at Brisbane 2032 and we can look back on how we got there in quite a longitudinal way.
Fantastic. All great project ideas. They've all been commissioned. Go for it. Right, now let's get some questions from the floor. Who would like to get us started? I can see one down the back. Yep.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Max. I was just curious, the Olympics are obviously coming up. What narratives do you think will be exciting coming out of the Olympics in the next couple of weeks? What have you guys all got your eyes on?
Well, Joanna's going. She leaves on Thursday night. Off you go. And I know you're working for a host broadcaster doing hockey.
Yes. So the ideal person to answer your question, Max, would be someone who's going to cover the whole games, for example, for a media outlet and had free reign on storytelling, whereas I'm working for host broadcast, which means whichever country you watch the Olympics in, you get the feed from our feed from every stadium. So I'm a little more restricted to interviewing hockey players for 90 seconds after each match. But I think just a snapshot of how everyone even made it there. And some people still aren't quite sure if they're going to make it there. And it's just going to be an unimaginably strange experience. I mean, imagine this is going to be your only Olympics as an athlete and you're having to do it in front of nobody. I think it will sort of be a microcosm of a lot of the challenges that people have faced over the past year and a half. And even though many people will look at Olympians and wonder if they should even be there and wonder if the Olympics should even be happening, which are all debates for another time, I think everyone can on some level relate to something that's happened in the last year and a half that they really wanted people to be there for and they won't be. And for so many athletes, especially those who this will be their only games, that's a really sad moment.
Yep. Anyone else?
I'm really excited that Australia has the highest First Nations contingent in it, like versus any other country. And what I'd be really excited to watch is obviously how those athletes go, but you'd love to have sort of a camera in at the community of where they're all from and things like that. But just obviously how they go. But I'd love to be in everyone's lounge rooms while they're playing. Yeah,
absolutely. Next question.
Hey, Rana. Is this on?
G'day.
In terms of women's sport coverage, outside of quantity, which we obviously know is still a big conversation and issue, in terms of content, what do you think is really missing in the women's sport coverage landscape?
This is just personal research, Gemma. Sorry.
aside from musical numbers. Someone really liked that one. That was funny.
I liked that one. I mean, I think we do it pretty well, but intersectionality is still, for me, something we need to keep our eye on and keep pushing. And in the sense of not just the kind of standard buckets, but just the kind of breadth of identities and intersections that we all have. Even stuff like motherhood, I know that often gets talked about, but like Megan Shute was on Twitter talking about the process that her and her partner have gone through to fall pregnant, and she copped a lot of trolling for that, she's in a same-sex relationship, and just, those stories that women are telling themselves, I know that sometimes, and I said it at the start of this conversation, but that, sport should be sport, but that is part of what female athletes go through. So I think some more of that storytelling, which I know you don't love, Gemma.
I think about
throwing you under the bus there.
The obsession that Women's Day have with Leighton Hewitt and Beck Hewitt's marriage. And I think, how cool would it be if we had the same approach to some of what our female athletes are doing? Because, honestly, every time you go to Coles, it's like a new update, even though probably none of it's real. It'd just be great to see.
None of it's real, I can tell you. It's not. They are happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
What?
They're probably super happy.
They're happy? Oh my gosh.
Magazines like that have a whiteboard with a list of 3 women or 5 women, whatever it is, just get the same women over and over again and just make up a story.
Yeah.
Because their research tells them that it sells.
Gets hits.
Gets hits.
Probably the other one is like injury and the female body. I think that's a conversation we probably don't have as much as I would like to hear about.
It's going to take a few years for that research to show what's happening in that area, but I totally agree. And with the motherhood and sport one is often put in the too hard basket. It's like sporting organisations who don't do enough to make it, make it possible for women to come back after having a child. So I think it's been a taboo subject for a long time. It's starting to change, and cricket's leading the way there with conditions in the contracts. But yeah, I'd like to see more of that as well.
I think the other one that really kind of was a big story, but there was clearly an appetite. There was an appetite for it. Was Lee Russell's conversation around leaving swimming and what that experience was like for her. That just felt like a kind of lightning rod moment, and there's clearly a conversation that people want to have.
Yeah. Not everybody wants to have.
Not everybody. We're having it.
Next question.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm curious, I guess, as to what everyone thinks about the role that community sport can play in continuing these conversations, particularly as Courtney had said before, that's sort of possibly the place where you're getting athletes who are more relatable to the average Australian. And so how can they step up, or what vehicles can they use to, really continue on this question?
Courtney?
Oh, yeah. That was a great question. Well, obviously community sport plays such a great role in providing a place where people can just show up and be themselves fully. And I think without even performing, touching a ball or running on grass, like that's one of the most precious things that in society we don't really have a lot of. So whether you participate or not, that's what sport can bring. So if there's a way to continue that narrative into our elite pathways and onto our televisions, I think that's crucial. But when it comes to platforms to tell a story, I think if we can't get broadcasting, for example, you've obviously got that storytelling method of written articles and podcasts and things like that. But I think it's inviting the media into your club and getting them to spend an afternoon there, and how refreshed they're going to feel and how safe and welcomed they're going to feel will hopefully ignite a beautiful story, I think.
And community sport at the junior level is so important for teaching the right kind of values, the respectful relationships that go missing when you get into federal politics. It's really important that we have the right people there coaching, and because those values set you up for life. I run around an oval every so often near my house, and I don't always like what I hear, and it worries me that sort of intense masculinity, starts at such a young age. So community sport is super important. How are we going? Couple more? Yeah, let's go for it. I'm in charge. Next question. I saw a hand down the back. Yep.
Hi. This really riffs off what you were just talking about, which is respect in sport, I think. But Joanna, I was so impressed by the way in which you told stories about women coming together in this sporting context, and in that longer form having time to talk about their life stories, and some of those included gendered violence. I'm interested to hear from folks about what it's like to try and tell that story in a sporting context. And also, I guess, thinking into the question of how we talk about survivors really respectfully.
it was, you know, it's obviously a very sensitive topic, especially when you're also speaking to a cohort of athletes who've never done any interviews before, really, never sort of been public figures. And one of the things, I guess, when I started making Power Mary, we knew that it was going to address gender equality and gender-based violence through what the players were saying, but we weren't really sure how explicitly. And in the end, it was quite implicit. And that was simply because the players didn't want to explicitly talk about it. But I think most people who've seen it have kind of picked up on that and commented on why it delivers a powerful message because it doesn't say it directly. You know, there's been a lot of sort of more campaigny type documentaries made in Papua New Guinea in particular that are sort of addressing this very head on with case studies. And we had quite a lot of feedback, especially from male audiences, that this was a different experience. This was almost kind of, I don't really know the right phrase, but you'd say ambush marketing if it was marketing, but it was basically just a conversation starter kind of hidden in a sporting context. But it kind of really depends. And I did have another point that I was going to make, but it has disappeared from my head, so I might throw it at anyone else in case it pops back.
Wow.
Rana, would you like to add something?
Not really, no. I guess we haven't touched on the flip side of this conversation, which is what do we do about men? And that's a bit cheeky of me. But you know, we do still see that perpetrators are centred even when we're reporting on violence, and it just keeps happening time and time again, and I honestly don't know how else to...
Well, look, in closing, I would like to say that we all agree that sport is a very powerful vehicle for promoting respect and responsibility and all the values that we hold dear to our hearts. It reaches men, it reaches boys, girls, women. We're a sport-obsessed nation, so I would like to see our major sports do more, because it is our nation's shame that a woman dies every week at the hands of a current or former partner. And I think that with a lot of the work I do, that's really why I do what I do. I mean, it's great to win and to win premierships and all of that, but really, don't we just want to live in a society where women are valued equally and women are safe inside and outside of their homes? And so I think that's a good note to end it on. That you know, we work in sport and we should do as much as we can to really create equality across the board. So thank you for that question. It's always in my mind, you know, what more can I do? And I know a lot of women who work in this space feel the same way as well. It's time to wrap up. I'm getting a lot of looks from the gentleman over there saying I've gone over time, which is par for the course. So that hour went very quickly. Please join me in thanking our terrific speakers, Rana, Courtney, Joanna, and our frenetic note-taker in seat 1A, Kate. Joanna, good luck, have fun, be safe in Tokyo. We can't wait to hear all about your adventure when you get back, so all the best from us. And thanks to everyone here for coming along and supporting women in sport and for supporting our stories and our way of storytelling as well. That's fantastic. And we'll see you all again soon. Thank you.
Visit wheelercentre.com for the best in books, writing and ideas from Melbourne, Australia and around the world.